Good evening and welcome back to the end of the last session of the 10th Annual Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being hosted by Aviation Watch and IPPAI. And with me is Captain A. Ranganathan. Welcome to the show, Captain.
Thank you.
Sir, with your immense years of flying experience and the time that you spent in analyzing the aviation sector, you said that the aviation sector in India is one of the most corrupt and that there is crony capitalism that makes it go around. Sir, could you qualify your statement?
We take the case of the way the numbers were played around by Jet Air, the Kingfisher, the promoters, the analysts, the banks. Just a year before the whole system collapsed, they were projecting that the airlines were doing exceptionally well. And there's enough proof of that. And when the international financial market collapsed, and this whole thing collapsed, so it wouldn't have come to light but for the banks collapsing because they had no money to give. Crony capitalism is when you keep lending only to your friends and family. And that is exactly what was happening because they all had the influence to get the bank loans and they were projecting themselves to be doing exceptionally well. And 1 month later, everything was down the drain.
Great, sir. So some people ascribe this entire going down the drain of the aviation sector in India to the high fuel prices, and that is something that everybody feels and believes in. Could you actually qualify that statement as well?
Well, that's actually a lot of rubbish because fuel prices went above $100 just for a couple of months, and it peaked to $145 just for a week or so. If you take the average fuel price for the whole year, it was much less than $100. So to take the high fuel prices as the cause of the collapse of aviation is wrong. The whole thing was because there was overcapacity. The regulator, the ministry should not have allowed so many aircrafts coming into the country when we didn't have the infrastructure and we didn't have the passenger load for that. So every airline was killing each other by cutting the fares, by trying to pick up the load. And filling up the loads where your yield is low is not going to bring you money.
So, given the fact that the regulator really cannot, I'm not sure if he can really make economic decisions in the sense that so much capacity should be used or there should be...
Well, if you look at a lot of when you talk of regulations rules, if you have to issue waivers and dispensations, that means your regulation has failed. And if you see from between 2004 and 2008, they have issued more waivers and dispensations than for 40 years. So that shows the amount of corruption in the system.
So, given the fact that we have had a string of near misses or air proximity incidents, or whatever the terminology you may use, what is really the way out? Is it in fact that we are underinvesting, or is it just normal laxity in systems or processes that we have?
I would say that when you talk of procedures, if you have a system in place where you follow procedures and rules strictly, and the training standards are really high, not just among pilots, it's got to be among air traffic controllers, the whole system, then it'll be a safe environment. But here what happens is like one of the most important factors they don't take into account is fatigue. Except for pilots, no other category in aviation has a duty time limit. And if you're tired, you're bound to make a mistake. And there are scientific studies which shows what is called time since awake. If you've been awake for more than 12 hours, your reaction time slows down so much. If it's more than 16 hours, your reaction time slows, and they say it's almost equivalent to having a blood alcohol level which is almost illegal for driving. That is the amount of reaction time slowness because of fatigue. And on top of that, you have reports of drunken pilots, and you have no restriction on any engineer or an air traffic controller from being under the influence of alcohol. So, like what happened in Bombay, if that tower controller had not reacted with that speed, there would have been a major disaster there.
Right. So speed is of the essence over there. The other thing that you had talked about in that brilliant presentation of yours is that the aviation sector grows cyclically. So when people were making these projections, they did not factor into account the cyclical growth. So, sir, where do you think we need to really improve on the forecast of the industry so that, for example, now that there is the Airport Economic Authority that's going to come in, maybe they should understand about capacity building and not allowing overcapacity to be built in the first place?
See, when you talk of projections, now you got to have people who don't just use simple multiplication. You may have a good load factor, good income this year. Doesn't mean that if you look 10 years ahead, you just multiply that figure by 10. That's exactly what they did. They projected that our growth is going. I gave the figures which is from an official statement which was made in the parliament. So if you take the figures, they've just done simple multiplication. Based on that, contracts and all the business things are done. And you know for a fact, you have to be naive if you think that no one's taking a kickback.
Well, sir, if we have independent auditors who are going through airlines' books, if we have independent regulatory authorities in place, why is it still that we need such systems still to be put further in place? That means that there is a laxity in regulation, that means that there is a definite laxity in policy making.
See, like you have to have very definite wording in your rules. When you use something, a word shall, that makes it mandatory. If you use a word may, it gives you the option of not carrying out. And if you read through the regulations, you will find that there are many rules which have the word may. You may do it, which means the operator doesn't do it. He can always say that it is not mandatory. So, and most important, you have to have deterrent permission. Now, take the case of pilots who have been found drunk. Now, that's a criminal act in my opinion. I'm against criminalization of accidents. But a drunk pilot, I feel he is a criminal because he's compromising the lives of so many passengers. And he should be debarred for a certain number of years. Let him go through it. Unless you have a deterrent punishment, he is not going to learn a lesson. And you have the case of one of the private airlines. The deputy manager of safety and an examiner was caught drunk on 22nd March. And on 25th March, he operated a flight with a raw co-pilot, as a trainee co-pilot. And the minister makes a statement that anyone caught drunk is grounded for 6 weeks. And he made that statement in Parliament. So it shows that, there is no sanctity in, you can just lie through your teeth.
Right. So, given the fact that ICAO has threatened to downgrade air safety or the airworthiness or the fact that the status of the airports, the safety status of the airports, and the DGCA is currently making efforts to come back to steam, come back to ICAO conforming to their regulations. Where do you think we are right now?
See, ICAO has not downgraded us. ICAO found several deficiencies in our system, especially in safety audit and in the qualification of personnel. It is the FAA which is going to downgrade us. Okay. And fortunately, I would say the best thing that has happened to aviation in India is a new DGCA. He may not have had experience in aviation, but I find that he is one person who seems extremely concerned about safety, and he is doing something positive. But what we have to work towards is getting him the support, because he may not get the support in a corrupt system from those who are working below him. But an effort has to be made to get him support, because if at all anyone can save the aviation in India, I feel it's the new DGCA.